But right now, we're going to talk about the issues facing politicians in Washington. And I'm joined on the phone with Neil Munro. He is the White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Neil, good morning.
Good morning to you guys.
Thank you. I appreciate you joining us. And you have been weathering quite a storm up there. We've had one overnight, but for the past several weeks, been a lot of scandals unfolding there in Washington. And one of the big ones that is going on right now, dealing with the Department of Justice. And, of course, our Attorney General Eric Holder trying to put out some fires there. And the Department of Justice seizing phone records of journalists, specifically James Rosen with Fox News, and keeping tabs on him as he does his work. And our Attorney General thought he would smooth things over by sitting down with members of the press, and they've all said no because the administration wanted this off the record. What are your thoughts on that? First, did you get an invitation, and what are your thoughts on this meeting?
To my shock and horror, we did not get an invitation at the Daily Caller.
No.
The New York Times and the Associated Press and many others did. However, we have weathered that indignity, and now we're watching as a bunch of the major media guys say they're not going to go to Attorney General Holder's meeting unless it's held on the record, unless they can describe what Holder said about why he treated the Fox News reporter like a criminal when asking a judge for permission to track the Fox News reporter's activities. It's a curious thing. I mean, it's understandable the feds want and should protect classified information, secret information. But they went to 3 judges and said, we want to track the reporter, and we're going to treat him as a criminal for doing reporting things, for talking to people, in order to get that tracking information. So this is very unusual, and it probably reflects the administration's general contempt for the media and its arrogance. It didn't happen recently. It happened a couple of years ago. It only came out now, recently, when the when the government records were released to reporters and they wrote about this stuff.
Well, Neil, I will take issue. The administration does not have contempt for the media as long as they're reporting and on everything just the way they like. Now there's a little contempt because the media is actually pushing back.
Oh, yeah, fair point. But I think in a sense, they have contempt for us because we're not doing a good enough job.
Right.
And so they look down their nose at us. They use us because we have been far too gentle with them over the years.
Well, I just want to make sure and point this out. My guest is Neil Munro, the White House correspondent with the Daily Caller, who holds the feet to the fire of this administration. And Neil is no stranger to holding the administration accountable. And hats off to you. This was in June of last year. The president was having a news conference in the Rose Garden, and he did his normal speak and tried to speak and dash. And you asked him a question, and albeit you acknowledge you are not the story, but you asked a question, and it was rather in the middle of his speech, and he did not answer the question. So you have a name for making sure that this administration answers questions, and they're not doing it now.
Oh, right. The reason I asked my mistimed question in the Rose Garden was they were announcing a big major policy. They were sort of granting a mini amnesty to younger illegal immigrants, and they weren't explaining it. They were sort of rushing to the policy past the reporters before the president was heading down to Mexico. It was a campaign trail trick, and they really didn't want to talk about that policy, which is now facing a court challenge and maybe reversed as illegal because the president is spending money he was not authorized or appropriated to not enforce the law that he's supposed to enforce. But this is sort of familiar for this administration. To a remarkable degree, they simply ignore the law.
Right. And I know your time is limited, Neil, so I want to move on to my next question here, in that I bring up that story to illustrate the point that you will ask the questions and you will get the answers no matter how you have to do it, which is the job of the White House press corps. And in your latest post on the Daily Caller, you point out the fact that Jay Carney, the White House press secretary, is curbing press appearances and curbing and reducing the times of his appearances and the gaggles. And this is not the accountability and transparency the administration promised.
Oh, for sure. let's say they've been under a lot of pressure because there's at least 3 scandals, perhaps several more, arguably, that they just don't particularly want to talk about. And the basic thing is the president simply doesn't seem to be following the law. When he bumps up against a law that he doesn't like, he just goes around it. The press doesn't hold its feet to the fire. But now that the press is sufficiently ashamed of itself for its behavior in the last couple of years, and perhaps eager to do a stronger job, is maybe a problem for the president, because he's doing a lot of things that are very unpopular, like this immigration bill. He's basically trying to change the law, bring in 30 million people over 10 years, force down wages of middle class and working class people. That's part of the deal. It's all the polls show this immigration push is just really unpopular. Most press in Washington, however, they're nice, comfortable, upper middle class people. They're happy with this new policy. But it will be interesting to see if the press covers that issue and the various scandals well.
Right.
I do doubt it myself.
I do. And one last question. We've got just a little bit of time left for you. I know you have a busy day, but your another recent post is about these scandals hammer the president's approval ratings, and do you see his numbers continuing to decline if they continue the way they treat the press?
They're not going to decline. It's hard to see them declining much further because the president has sort of rock bottom minimum possible poll rating of around 42-3%. These are people who vote for him under all circumstances. But he's heading down towards that. He's 45 and dipping in some polls. And the reason why is because the swing voters who stood by him for a long time, partly because they sort of don't like political fights, they don't like the political hurly-burly, and the media has portrayed Republicans as meanies and bad faith. But now the media is portraying the president in a negative light. The swing voters have fled the president on some of these scandals. So many of the swing voters also say, well, I don't like what's going on, but I don't want to make up my mind. If these scandals, such as the tax scandal, the IRS targeting, the various Obamacare scandals, the Benghazi scandal, the media surveillance scandal, if they go on and he isn't able to fix them, his poll numbers will drop to another couple of points, and they'll basically reach his minimum of about 40% approval. That'll be very damaging to him. I
agree, and to the midterms. Neil Munro with the Daily Caller. Appreciate your time this morning, and keep up the good work. You got to shine a light on what's going on there in D.C., and you are doing just that. Neil, thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
All right, have a great day. All right, a lot of stuff going on in D.C., and the press has been keeping tabs on it, and they've been put in the dark themselves. So things will be changing in terms of the coverage of the events going on there in Washington.